Once upon a time, there was a woman who had no children. She once went to a good witch for help. The woman said she was dreaming of a child. The sorceress gave her a seed and ordered to plant it in a flower pot. The woman was very happy, thanked the old woman, and went home. At home, she planted a seed, watered it, and began to wait patiently. Soon a large wonderful flower, like a tulip, grew in the pot. When its petals opened, there was a tiny girl inside. She was very small, no more than an inch. Therefore, the woman called her Thumbelina. One night, when Thumbelina was fast asleep, a huge toad climbed onto the window of the house, wet and ugly. She grabbed the sleeping girl and hurried to her swamp. The toad decided to marry her ugly son to the beautiful Thumbelina. She planted her in the middle of the river on a wide lily leaf so that the girl would not run away. In the morning, Thumbelina woke up, and realized that she was not at home, but there was water around her. When the girl realized what a terrible fate awaited her, she wept bitterly. At this moment, small fish swam past. They felt sorry for Thumbelina. They gnawed at the stem of the lily, and the leaf floated with the flow with the girl. A large beetle flew past. Seeing a beautiful girl, he grabbed her and carried her to a tree, where he introduced her to his friends. They all envied her beauty, but said that Thumbelina was very ugly and could not be in their company. Under pressure from acquaintances, the beetle also decided that she was ugly, lowered the girl to the ground and said goodbye. All summer Thumbelina lived alone in the forest. She made a cradle for herself from grass and leaves. She ate on pollen and dew, basked in the sun in clear weather, and hid from the rain under a large leaf of burdock. But soon cold rains and winds came. Thumbelina did not have a winter outfit, and she began to freeze. The girl suffered from hunger and cold, and one day she was sheltered by a field mouse. They lived together gloriously. The girl helped the mouse with the housework, told her fairy tales, and in return received warm housing and food. The field mouse had a neighbor, a wealthy blind mole, who did this by counting his wealth all the time. Even being blind, the mole realized that Thumbelina was very cute and offered to marry her. But the girl was not at all happy about this. She did not like the boring mole. Once, walking along the underground passages, Thumbelina saw a wounded swallow, which almost died of the cold.
Oh no!
All winter she took care of the sick bird and by the spring she cured her. Before the wedding, Thumbelina asked the mouse to let her go upstairs to admire the sun at last. When she climbed out of the mouse hole, she saw a swallow, which she cured. Thumbelina complained to the bird that she was being forced to marry a nasty mole and live with him deep underground. The swallow invited the girl to fly with her to warm lands, and she agreed. She quickly said goodbye to the mouse, climbed onto the swallow, and they flew away. Once in a wonderful country, Thumbelina saw a huge meadow with beautiful flowers. She chose the most beautiful flower for herself to live in. Suddenly, she saw in the flower the same little man as she, only with wings. It was the king of the elves. And an elf lived in every flower. The beautiful elf has never seen a girl as small as himself, and even so beautiful. He immediately fell in love with Thumbelina, and invited her to become his wife, the queen of the elves and the queen of flowers. After all her adventures, the girl was happy to hear such an offer from the charming prince. She happily agreed. The elf took Thumbelina by the hand, and at the same moment 2 wings appeared behind her. Now she has become the queen of the elves. And since then they have lived happily ever after.
Doomed by fate to lead a hectic life, Lemuel Gulliver again set off on a voyage on the adventure ship 2 months after returning home. But as soon as the ship passed the Strait of Madagascar, a storm overtook it. Strong gusts of wind carried the ship to an unknown land. When the sailors saw the land, they decided to inspect it and collect fresh water. Gulliver went down to the shore with the sailors, and the crew scattered across the island. Not finding water, Gulliver decided to return to the shore. But as soon as he approached the ocean, he saw that the sailors had abandoned him. They were sailing away in full sail from the huge giant who was chasing them. Frightened, Gulliver rushed into the interior of the island. He ran to a barley field with huge ears and realized that he was in the land of giants. Gulliver sat down to rest. But before he had time to catch his breath, he noticed a huge foot that was about to step on him. Gulliver started screaming as loudly as he could. And the giant noticed him. He lifted Gulliver with his hand, examined him intently, and carried the little man to the owner farmer. The farmer tried to speak to Gulliver, but his voice was so loud that it deafened the little man. Then the owner brought Gulliver home. At the house, the farmer's family was preparing for dinner. The little man was seated on a table where gigantic pieces of beef and bread lay. But before Gulliver had time to break off his bread, the farmer's son grabbed it upside down and began to shake it. He mistook Gulliver for a toy and tried to put it in his mouth. Then the father loudly threatened his son and asked him to treat the little man more carefully. Later, the farmer's 9-year-old daughter made a bed for Gulliver, sewed clothes for him, and even taught him the language of the giants. The girl gave Gulliver the name Grildrig, which meant dwarf. He called her a nanny. Gulliver aroused great interest among other giants, so the farmer began to show him at fairs for money. But frequent performances undermined Gulliver's health. Then the farmer happily sold the little man to the queen. So Gulliver moved to the palace and became the darling of the royal family. However, the court dwarf, who was no longer considered the smallest man in the kingdom, disliked Gulliver and ruined his life in every possible way. Once, when Gulliver was strolling through the garden, the dwarf began to cower the apple tree. And Gulliver had to escape from the falling giant apples.
Oh no!
And on another occasion, an agile dwarf pushed Gulliver into a huge jug of cream. And only the cook, who entered on time, saved the little man from inevitable death. But it wasn't just because of the dwarf that Gulliver got into trouble. So one morning during breakfast he was grabbed by the cook monkey. Like a cub, she began to rock Gulliver and then dragged him to the roof. The giants rushed to save the little man. And as soon as they climbed onto the roof, the monkey threw Gulliver off. Fortunately, he managed to catch onto the shingles and was safely rescued. In general, Gulliver's life in the kingdom was happy. He often accompanied the queen on her travels. They even made a special travel box for him. And once on another such trip, the servant brought the box with Gulliver out to the sea so that the little man could enjoy the fresh air. But then a shadow began to flicker over Gulliver's head. A sea eagle flying past noticed prey in a box. He grabbed the ring on the lid of the chest with his beak and carried Gulliver over the ocean. At some point, the bird released the box, and the captive found himself in the open sea. Gulliver barely managed to open the top hatch. He started shouting and waving his handkerchief. Finally, he was spotted from the ship and helped to get out. So, after all the adventures, Gulliver returned to England again. For a long time, he could not get used to objects and people of normal size. And Gulliver's wife, frightened that he had gone mad, strictly forbade her husband to think about traveling.